The void between universes doesn't have a sound. That's the first thing wrong with it. No hum, no wind, no static. Just a pressure behind the eyes like the moment before a held breath gives out. It is the space the tournament of power carved out of nothing. An arena stitched together by the two small gods sitting above it, and it should not have room in it for anything that wasn't invited. Saitama fell through it anyway. 1 second he'd been standing in the ruins of a supermarket parking lot on a Tuesday that had promised nothing interesting, mid-sigh over a coupon that expired that afternoon. The next, the air folded like a badly drawn cartoon panel, swallowed him whole, and spat him out somewhere that smelled like ozone and had too many suns. He landed on his feet. He always landed on his feet. Gravity had stopped being a real obstacle for him a long time ago, and looked around with the same flat, unimpressed expression he wore for everything from mild inconveniences to the collapse of buildings. He was standing in the middle of an arena roughly the size of a small country. Around its edges, tiered stands rose into a sky that didn't seem to belong to any single planet, packed with beings that ranged from humanoid to insectile to shapes his eyes slid off entirely. Some of them had 4 arms. Some of them had no visible faces. All of them, in the space of about 2 seconds, turned to look at him. Directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating off scorched ground, a fight was already in progress. 2 combatants, mid-lunge, both crackling with power that bent the air around them like heat mirage. Neither had noticed him yet. They were too busy trying to kill each other. "Huh," Saitama said, to no one. "This doesn't look like the grocery store." The first to notice him was a wiry fighter in patchwork leather, mid-swing on an opponent twice his size, a Universe 9 combatant named Roselle, one of Frost's crew, all sharp teeth and sharper opportunism. Roselle's eyes cut sideways, caught the sudden appearance of a bald man in yellow standing calmly in the middle of a kill zone, and made an instant, badly informed decision. "New player," Roselle hissed, already redirecting his momentum. "Free elimination." He came in fast, inhumanly fast, the kind of speed that turned 300 meters into half a second. A clawed hand already extending toward Saitama's throat with enough force behind it to take a mountain off its foundations. Saitama flicked 2 fingers. It wasn't even a real gesture. It barely qualified as effort. The tap connected with Roselle's incoming wrist and simply redirected the entire attack, and the fighter attached to it, sideways, off the platform, and out of the tournament boundary with a soft pop of disqualification light, before Roselle had time to register that his plan had failed. Silence. Not the good kind. For half a second, the entire arena, every fighter mid-combo, every god in the stands, every angel with a hand halfway to their staff, simply stopped. The kind of stop that happens when several hundred beings who each individually believed they understood the rough shape of strong, watched a stranger erase a combatant with less effort than swatting a fly. "Was that supposed to happen?" Saitama asked the air, scratching the back of his head. "Is this some kind of game show?" High above the arena floor, in the observation platform reserved for the 2 small figures who owned this entire event, one of the Xenos tilted his head, with the specific delighted curiosity of a child who has just found a new toy. "Ooh," said future Zeno. "Who's that?" "Not on any roster," said present Zeno, equally delighted, equally unbothered by the implications. "Is that allowed?" Standing just behind their thrones, the Grand Priest's expression did not change. It never really did. But something in the set of his shoulders sharpened by a fraction of a degree that, on him, counted as alarm. "Your Highnesses," he said carefully. "That individual is not registered to any of the 16 universes. He should not be able to exist within these tournament boundaries at all." "But he is," present Zeno said, swinging his small legs, clearly viewing this as the best possible outcome. "So it's fine." 3 tiers down, in the section reserved for Universe 7, Beerus's tail had gone rigid as a rod. He leaned toward Whis without taking his eyes off the arena floor. "Whis, what is that?" Weiss raised his staff, peered through it with the mild professional interest of a man checking the weather, and hummed. "How curious," he said. "I'm reading no key signature at all, not suppressed, absent, as though his body simply doesn't generate the kind of energy I'd know how to measure." "That's not a comforting sentence, Weiss." "No," Weiss agreed pleasantly. "It really isn't." Down on the arena floor, several fighters had begun making the same mistake Roselle had, in staggered succession, because raw instinct in a tournament like this said unknown equals opportunity, and none of them had been given time to update that math. A Universe 3 android unfolded 4 mechanical limbs and opened fire with a barrage of concentrated energy blasts, each one easily capable of leveling a city block. Saitama watched them come with the enthusiasm of a man waiting for a delayed bus. He didn't dodge. He didn't need to. He raised one gloved hand, almost lazily, and the entire barrage simply stopped a foot from his palm, hanging in the air for a half-second like a held breath, being dissolved into harmless glimmering dust that drifted down around him like the world's most anticlimactic snow. "Okay," Saitama said, mostly to himself, sounding almost hopeful. That one had some decent output at least. Not enough, though. The android's central processor, watching its entire offensive suite get casually deleted, made the tournament's second disqualification-worthy retreat in under a minute, flinging itself backward off the platform rather than test what happened next. That was when Son Goku, 3 sections over and mid-clash with a Universe 6 opponent, felt something in the back of his skull go off. Not a power spike. Weiss was right. There wasn't one to detect. But something stranger. An absence where a presence should be. A held-breath wrongness in the shape of the fight itself. "Whoa," Goku said, disengaging from his own opponent mid-swing with the easy discourtesy of a man who'd just noticed something more interesting happening across the room. "Hang on, I gotta go see that." He crossed the distance in 3 explosive instant transmission-adjacent hops, landing in a crouch a dozen meters from where the bald stranger was currently examining his own glove like it might contain the answer to why nothing in this place felt like a real fight yet. "Hey," Goku said, grinning, already forgetting the opponent he'd abandoned mid-sentence. "That was awesome. What was that? Some kind of key absorption technique?" Saitama looked at him. Ordinary spiky-haired guy in an orange gi, radiating the specific overeager energy of someone who'd clearly never had a bad day in his life, currently looking at Saitama like Christmas had come early. "I just punched it," Saitama said. "Well, slapped it, technically. Barely counts." "You didn't even use ki," Goku said, delighted, circling him now with the frank, unself-conscious curiosity of a kid at a zoo exhibit. "Or, did you? I can't read anything off you at all." "That's kind of amazing, actually. You want to fight? I want to see what you've got." Saitama's expression did something it rarely did. It flickered, just slightly, with something that wasn't quite hope, but lived in the same neighborhood. "You any good?" he asked. "I mean," Goku said, still grinning. "Probably. Want to find out?" For the first time since a supermarket parking lot had folded itself into nothing, Saitama felt something that might, generously, be described as interest. "Sure," he said. "Why not?" He rolled his shoulder once. An old habit, meaningless now. Muscle memory from a body that hadn't needed to warm up in longer than he could remember. And the arena, sensing that something had just been agreed to, seemed to hold its breath around them. High above, the Grand Priest was already moving toward the Xenos' side with the unhurried urgency of someone who suspected this needed managing before it became a genuine catastrophe. "Your Highnesses," he said, "given the unregistered participants' disruption of standard tournament rules, I would recommend—" "Let them fight," President Zeno said, chin propped on both hands, eyes bright. "It'll be fun," future Zeno agreed. The Grand Priest inclined his head, the closest he came to visible resignation, and said nothing further. Above them, 16 universes worth of fighters were beginning to realize, in staggered waves of dawning alarm, that whatever had just landed in their arena had not registered a single measurable trace of power doing something that, by every law they understood, should have been physically impossible. In the Universe 11 section, Jiren, arms crossed, expression as still as carved stone, unmoved by displays that had made entire crowds gasp all tournament long, opened his eyes fully for the first time since the match began, and looked, really looked, at the man in yellow across the arena. He didn't say anything. He rarely did. But something in the stillness of his focus sharpened, the way it did only for things he considered worth his full attention. And for the first time all day, that attention wasn't on Goku at all. Down on the arena floor, Goku settled into a loose, ready stance, still grinning, radiating the specific joy of a man who suspected, correctly, though he couldn't have said why, that he was about to have the best fight of his life. "Ready when you are," he said. Saitama cracked his neck once, unbothered, and didn't bother matching the stance. He never did. Yeah, he said. "Let's just get this over with." Neither of them moved yet, but the entire arena, every god, every priest, every fighter from 16 dying universes, had gone dead silent, because whatever was about to happen next, everyone in that stadium could feel, on some animal level beneath language, that it was going to change what strong meant for the rest of the tournament. The first exchange happened too fast for most of the arena to track. Goku came in low, a blur of orange and blue that closed the distance in a heartbeat, his fist already cocked into a strike that had, over the course of this tournament alone, put 3 separate opponents through solid rock. It connected. Saitama didn't dodge it, didn't block it, just let it land square in his open palm like he was catching a thrown ball. And the shockwave from the impact alone cratered the ground in a 20-meter radius, sent dust and debris rolling outward in a visible ring, and did absolutely nothing else. "Huh," Saitama said, looking down at his own palm with something like professional curiosity. "That's got some snap to it." Goku blinked, pulled his fist back, and grinned wider. The expression of a man who'd just found out the puzzle was harder than expected, and was thrilled about it. "Okay, didn't expect that to just stop." "Yeah, well." Saitama rolled his shoulder. "Get a running start next time." Goku laughed, an actual delighted laugh, the kind he hadn't managed in this tournament since the fight had started feeling like survival instead of fun, and came in again, faster this time, chaining a combination that would have ended most fights in this arena in under 3 seconds. Elbow, knee, a spinning heel strike aimed at the temple, each one landing exactly where he wanted it to, and doing exactly nothing to the man they landed on. Saitama let each hit connect. He wasn't being cocky about it, or he was, but it wasn't performative. It was just that nothing yet had given him a reason to actually move his feet. "You're fast," he said, mid-combo, sounding genuinely pleased about it in the flat, effectless way he sounded pleased about anything. "Fastest thing I've fought in a while, actually." "You're not even blocking," Goku said, breathing a little harder now, the first real exertion he'd shown all tournament. "How are you not even blocking?" Didn't need to yet. That was when Goku, mid-exchange, made a decision he'd made exactly twice before in his life, against opponents who genuinely warranted it. He stopped holding back the part of himself that lived past the edge of comfortable strength. Blue lightning crackled up his arms. His hair didn't change color this time. It didn't need to, not yet. But the air around him went taut, charged, humming with a pressure that made the ground beneath his feet visibly compress. Ultra instincts leading edge, the state before the full transformation, the reflexive speed that let his body react to threats before his mind had finished processing them. He came in again. This time, Saitama actually moved his hand to block it. That single fact, the fact that Saitama had bothered to react at all, sent a visible ripple through the stands. In the Universe 7 section, Beerus's tail had gone rigid as a flagpole. Vegeta, 3 platforms over, had abandoned his own fight entirely, and was staring across the arena with an expression caught somewhere between fury and disbelief that a total unknown was making Kakarot work for it. He blocked, Vegeta said, to no one, voice tight. Kakarot made him actually block. The exchange that followed lasted 4 full seconds, an eternity by the standards of this fight. A blur of strikes and counters too fast for most of the stadium to parse in real time. Goku pouring genuine effort into every blow, and Saitama meeting each one with the exact minimum force required to stop it cold, like a man doing dishes rather than fighting for his life. Then Goku threw a punch with real weight behind it, the kind that had, earlier in the tournament, taken a Universe 2 fighter clean off the platform. And Saitama caught it. Just caught it. Fist in open palm, the impact rippling outward in a visible shockwave that flattened grass and cracked stone in a 100-meter radius, and held it there. Okay, Saitama said. That one actually hurt a little. Goku's grin didn't waver, but something in his eyes sharpened. Recognition, maybe, or the specific thrill of finally finding a wall worth pushing against. Yeah? Good. That's really good, actually. He was still smiling when the ground beneath them detonated, not from either of them, from above. A concentrated blast of condensed ki, precise and merciless, fired not at Goku but directly at the stranger disrupting a tournament that determined the literal survival of entire universes. It came from Toppo, once a pride trooper, now something stranger and heavier since his brush with a god of destruction's power, a being who took threats to cosmic order as a personal, sacred obligation. An anomaly outside the registered combatants cannot be permitted to interfere with the survival of the universes, Toppo said, voice booming with the weight of conviction, already descending from where he'd been watching, hands crackling with barely restrained Hakai-adjacent energy. By the justice within me, I will remove this threat myself. The blast hit Saitama directly. It didn't do anything, didn't do much, didn't do anything. The energy simply hit him, absorbed into nothing, and dispersed into the air like it had never been fired at all, leaving Saitama standing in the exact same spot, with the exact same bored expression, now mildly irritated that his conversation with Goku had been interrupted. "Hey," Saitama said, turning toward Toppo with genuine, if muted, annoyance. "I was in the middle of something." Toppo staggered, actually staggered, the recoil of his own failed attack running back up through his own limbs like it had bounced off a wall built from something other than matter. "That's impossible. That was a destruction-adjacent technique. Nothing organic should be able to simply—" "You done?" Saitama asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He crossed the distance between them in a single step that didn't look fast. That was the unsettling part, Goku would say later, describing it to Beerus with wide eyes and genuine reverence. It never looked fast. It just happened. And tapped Toppo once on the chest with 2 fingers. Toppo left the arena boundary at a velocity that turned him into a streak of light, cleared the outer barrier entirely, and vanished from the tournament with the soft chime of disqualification before his brain had finished processing that he'd been hit. The stadium went dead silent again. Properly silent this time, the kind that came after something got recalibrated at a fundamental level. In the observation platform, the Grand Priest's composure had, for the second time that day, visibly cracked. Not into panic, he didn't do panic, but into something adjacent to genuine professional concern. "Your Highnesses," he said, "I must strongly recommend intervention. This individual has now eliminated a destroyer-tier combatant without sustaining so much as—" "He's fun," Present Zeno said, practically vibrating with delight. "Can we keep him?" "That is not how the tournament structure functions, Your Highness." "Boring," Future Zeno said, and went back to watching. Down below, Goku had lowered his fists, breathing hard, staring at the space where Toppo had been standing a half-second ago, with an expression that had shifted from playful to genuinely, seriously focused. "Okay," he said, quietly, mostly to himself. Okay, I need to actually try now. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were flat silver, and the air around him went utterly, deathly still. No wind, no sound, no pressure, just a total absence where his key signature should have registered, replaced by something that moved before it thought. Ultra instinct. Whis, watching from the Universe 7 section, allowed himself a small, genuinely surprised smile. Well, he's committing early. Saitama looked at the transformation with the first flicker of real, unguarded interest he'd shown all day. Eyebrows rising slightly, mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile but lived close to it. Okay, he said. Now we're getting somewhere. Goku moved. It wasn't fast, exactly. Fast implied a start and an end, a point A and a point B that the eye could track between. He was simply there, then somewhere else, a strike already connecting with the side of Saitama's jaw, before the sound of the previous position finished catching up. Saitama's head barely moved. There it is, he said, sounding almost pleased, working his jaw once. That's a real hit. Goku didn't stop to celebrate the fact that he'd finally, actually connected with something. He kept moving, weaving strikes together in a rhythm too fast for conscious thought, ultra instinct guiding every motion a half-second ahead of where his body would have gone on instinct alone. And for the first time since he'd landed in this arena, Saitama started moving his feet, not fighting back yet. Just adjusting, tracking. The bare minimum effort recalibrated upward, incrementally, the way a man might finally stand up from a couch because the television had gotten slightly too interesting to watch lying down. You're getting better, Saitama said, between exchanges, sounding genuinely delighted about it. This is actually kind of fun. Glad, Goku said, ducking a counter that would have taken his head off if it had landed. One of us is having fun. In the stands, Vegeta had stopped breathing entirely for what felt like a full 10 seconds. Around him, entire delegations from universes that hadn't spoken a shared word all tournament had gone quiet in unison, watching two impossible things happen in the same patch of scorched earth. A mortal fighting on the razor edge of a god's reflexes, and a stranger who'd walked in from nowhere finally looking like he might need to try. High above them, the Grand Priest turned to face the two small gods on their thrones with an expression that had, for the first time in longer than most mortals present could conceive of, settled into something genuinely unreadable. Your Highnesses, he said carefully, I believe we may need to reconsider the tournament's rules regarding disqualification. If this continues to escalate at its current rate, the arena boundary itself may not be sufficient to— He didn't get to finish the sentence. Below, Saitama finally raised his fist. Not fast, not dramatic. Just the plain, unhurried motion of a man deciding the warm-up was over. And the entire arena, 16 universes worth of the Multiverse's strongest fighters, felt the air itself go taut in anticipation of what that punch was going to do when it finally landed. The punch didn't land where anyone expected. Goku saw it coming. Ultra instinct made sure of that, his body already shifting into a dodge a fraction of a second before his conscious mind had registered the danger. But Saitama's fist changed direction mid-swing, correcting for the dodge with an ease that shouldn't have been possible for a strike that fast, and connected with Goku's guarding forearm instead of his exposed jaw. The shockwave that followed didn't look like an explosion. It looked like the world flinching. The arena floor beneath both of them cratered in a spiral pattern that spread outward for nearly half a kilometer, throwing up a wall of pulverized stone and dust that rolled across the stadium like a localized storm front. Combatants on the outer platforms, mid-fight, were forced to abandon their own matches just to keep their footing as the shockwave rolled through. Universe 6's Saiyans staggering, Universe 4's fighters bracing against a wind that had no business existing in a closed arena, Frieza's remaining soldiers actually diving flat to avoid being swept off the platform entirely. When the dust cleared, Goku was still standing. Barely, His guarding arm hung at a wrong angle, already beginning to knit itself back together through sheer regenerative stubbornness, and his silver eyes had gone wide with something that wasn't fear. Goku didn't really do fear, not in any way that stopped him, but was close enough to genuine alarm that Whis, watching from the Universe 7 section, actually lowered his staff. That, Whis said, with the careful precision of a man recalibrating a very long-held assumption, was a serious blow. Beerus hadn't moved his tail in almost a minute. Whis, could you have blocked that? Whis considered the question with real thought, which itself was answer enough. I believe so. I would prefer not to test it. Down on the arena floor, Goku straightened, shook the last of the dust from his shoulders and, improbably, impossibly, in the specific way that had made him who he was across every fight he'd ever survived, grinned. Okay, he said, flexing the arm as the bone finished setting itself. That's the good stuff. That's what I came here for. Saitama looked at his own fist, turning it over once, like he was checking it for damage that hadn't occurred. You took that pretty well, he said. Most things don't get back up from that. I've had worse, Goku said, which was almost certainly a lie, delivered with total sincerity. You want to go again? Before Saitama could answer, the air above the arena split. It wasn't dramatic, no light show, no thunderclap, just a quiet, absolute authority settling over the entire stadium, like a held breath being released all at once. Every fighter on every platform froze mid-motion. Even the ongoing background matches, the dozens of smaller skirmishes still technically in progress across the arena's outer edges, simply stopped, as combatants who had been trying to kill each other a half-second earlier turned, in perfect unison, to look toward the sky. The Grand Priest had descended. He landed without disturbing so much as a grain of dust, robes settling around him with the same unhurried calm he carried into everything, and regarded Saitama with an expression that had, for the first time all day, resolved into something genuinely difficult to read. Not fear, not quite, but the careful attentiveness of someone recalculating a threat assessment they'd been putting off. Forgive the interruption, the Grand Priest said, voice carrying without seeming to raise at all. But I find myself needing to ask you a question that, remarkably, no one has thought to ask yet. Who are you, and what do you want here? Saitama blinked, apparently surprised that this was the first time anyone had bothered. Saitama, he said. And, nothing really. I didn't ask to be here. Some kind of hole opened up and I fell through it. I was just trying to get to a sail before it ended. The Grand Priest's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A fractional stillness that, on a being of his standing, counted as genuine surprise. You mean to say, he said slowly, that your arrival here was entirely accidental? Yeah. And you hold no allegiance to any of the 16 universes competing in this tournament? Didn't know there were 16, Saitama said, scratching the back of his head. Didn't know there was a tournament, honestly, until that guy in the orange started throwing kicks at me. Goku, still nursing the last of his healing arm, raised a hand sheepishly. That was me, sorry. The Grand Priest was quiet for a long moment, long enough that the entire arena, still frozen in place, seemed to hold its breath along with him. Then he turned, slightly, to address the two small figures watching from above with an expression of undisguised delight that suggested they, unlike everyone else present, were having the best day of the tournament so far. Your Highnesses, the Grand Priest said, this changes the situation considerably. If the newcomer's presence here is genuinely accidental, and he holds no stake in any universe's survival, then by the tournament's own foundational rules, he cannot legally participate. His continued presence actively corrupts every match he interferes with, whether he intends it or not. But he's fun, Present Zeno said again, this time with a note of real protest. He eliminated Topo, the Grand Priest said, gently, the way one might reason with a very powerful child, because that was, functionally, exactly what he was doing. If he continues to eliminate registered combatants at random, Entire universes may be disqualified through no fault of their own. That would not be fair, and I know both of you care very much about fairness. That landed. Both Xenos went quiet, the particular quiet of children being reminded of a rule they'd genuinely forgotten they cared about, and exchanged a look that passed some silent negotiation between them. "Fine," Future Zeno said, with palpable reluctance. "But he doesn't just get sent home. That's boring too. A reasonable compromise, Your Highness," the Grand Priest said, and turned back to face Saitama directly, robes shifting with the same unhurried calm as before. "Here is what I propose. You did not ask to come here, and this tournament's rules were never built with someone like you in mind. I cannot allow you to continue interfering with matches that determine the survival of entire universes. But I also recognize, and I suspect several beings in this arena would privately agree, that simply sending you home changes nothing about the fact that you exist, and that something in the fabric connecting your world to ours allowed you through in the first place." "So what?" Saitama said. "You want me to just leave?" "I want to offer you a choice," the Grand Priest said. "You may return to your world, and I will personally see to it that the rift that brought you here is sealed cleanly, with no lasting damage to either universe. Or, and here, for the first time, something that might have been genuine curiosity flickered across his otherwise serene features, you may remain, outside official tournament structure, as an observer under my personal authority, until we better understand how and why this happened at all. Multiple beings in this arena have already taken a great deal of interest in you. I suspect that interest will not fade quietly, as if summoned by the observation. A presence detached itself from the Universe 11 section and crossed the arena floor with slow, deliberate steps that somehow covered the distance faster than they should have. Jiren stopped a dozen meters from the conversation, arms still crossed, expression as unmoved as ever, but his eyes were fixed entirely on Saitama, with an intensity that hadn't been directed at anyone else all tournament, not even Goku. "I would like to fight him," Jiren said, not a request. A statement of fact, delivered with the flat certainty of a man who had spent his entire life training for a moment, exactly like this one, and had never expected to find it. Jiren said. Goku's grin, somehow, got wider, called it. Saitama looked between the Grand Priest's patient offer, Goku's obvious delight, and Jiren's unreadable singular focus, and something in his flat expression shifted, not into excitement exactly, because genuine excitement had abandoned Saitama a long time ago, but into the closest thing he still had to it. A kind of tired, hopeful curiosity. The look of a man who had been disappointed so many times that he'd stopped expecting otherwise, cautiously entertaining the possibility that this time, maybe, might be different. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "The going home part, I mean, not." He glanced at Jiren. "That. I'm doing that regardless." The Grand Priest inclined his head, the picture of infinite, unbothered patience. "Of course. Though I would ask that you make your decision before the tournament's conclusion. The rift that brought you here will not remain stable indefinitely. The longer it is left open, the more strain it places on the boundary between your universe and this one. I would prefer to close it before that strain becomes a problem neither of our worlds can easily undo." It was a small detail, delivered gently, almost as an afterthought, but it landed on the arena's tension like a stone into still water. A problem neither of our worlds can easily undo. Whis, still watching from the stands, exchanged a brief, loaded glance with Beerus. Even Vegeta, arms crossed and jaw tight, seemed to file the detail away with the particular wariness of a man who understood, better than most present, what happened when a universe's fabric got stretched further than it was built to hold. Saitama, for his part, didn't seem overly concerned. He was still looking at Jiren, weighing something in his own head that had nothing to do with cosmic stakes, and everything to do with the simple, uncomplicated hope that this might finally be the fight that didn't end in disappointment. "All right," Saitama said. Let's do this one first then. We can talk logistics after. Jiren said nothing. He simply uncrossed his arms, settled into a stance that had ended the ambitions of gods, and waited. The Grand Priest stepped back, robes settling once more into perfect stillness, and raised a hand toward the Xenos in silent request. Present Zeno, delighted beyond measure that the day had somehow gotten even more interesting, waved a small hand in enthusiastic permission. Across the arena, 16 universes worth of fighters, some still nursing wounds from earlier matches, some frozen mid-motion since the Grand Priest's descent, all of them now watching a confrontation that every instinct in the stadium recognized as the real main event, went utterly, completely silent. Jiren moved first. He didn't build up to it. There was no telegraphed wind-up, no gathering of visible energy, just a closed fist crossing the distance between them at a speed that had, over the course of this tournament, made gods reconsider their own limits, aimed squarely at the center of Saitama's chest. Saitama caught it in one open palm. The shockwave that followed didn't just crater the ground. It tore a visible ring through the air itself, a ripple of distorted light that raced outward across the entire arena and rattled the observation platform hundreds of meters above, forcing even the Grand Priest to brace, very slightly, against a wind that shouldn't have been able to touch him at all. When the light cleared, Saitama was still holding Jiren's fist in his palm, unmoved, expression settling into something that, for the first time since a supermarket parking lot had folded into nothing beneath his feet, looked almost, genuinely, alive. "Okay," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone watching. "There you are." Jiren didn't answer. He simply pulled back, reset his stance, and attacked again. Faster this time, harder. The first real acknowledgement in longer than he could remember that he had finally, actually, found someone worth his full effort. And somewhere above the arena, unnoticed by nearly everyone caught up in the spectacle unfolding below, the rift that had first deposited Saitama into this world flickered once, at the edge of visible space. A thin, silent tear in the fabric between two universes, patiently, quietly widening. The fight between Saitama and Jiren didn't have a rhythm the rest of the tournament could follow. It stopped being a spectacle within the first 30 seconds, and became something closer to a natural disaster. 2 points of contact tearing craters across an arena the size of a small country, each exchange sending shockwaves that rolled through platforms 3 sections away, and forced entire delegations to brace against winds that had no earthly business existing indoors. Jiren fought with the discipline of a man who had spent his entire existence training for a single, theoretical opponent worthy of everything he had, and having finally found one, gave him all of it without hesitation or restraint. Saitama met every strike with the same flat, unbothered calm he'd carried since he first landed, except now, for the first time, that calm had started to look less like boredom and more like focus. He was still holding back. Everyone with the eyes to see it could tell that much. But the margin had narrowed, just slightly, and in an arena full of beings who measured power for a living, that narrowing was the loudest thing in the stadium. "He's not toying with him anymore," Vegeta said, low, arms still crossed, watching from the Universe 7 section with an intensity he usually reserved for his own fights. "Look at his footwork. He's actually planting now." Beside him, Whis tilted his head, staff raised, watching the exchange with genuine rapt attention. "He is. Jiren's managed something I wasn't certain was possible against him. He's made the stranger care about the outcome." Below, mid-exchange, Jiren's fist connected with Saitama's guarding forearm hard enough to crack the ground beneath both their feet in a spiral fracture that spread nearly 100 meters in every direction. Saitama's arm didn't break, but he staggered. An actual visible half-step backward, the first ground he'd given up since arriving, and something in his expression sharpened into genuine, unguarded surprise. "Huh," he said, flexing the arm once. That one had some real weight behind it. "You're still holding back," Jiren said. It wasn't an accusation. It was simply an observation, delivered with the same flat certainty he brought to everything. "Little bit," Saitama admitted. "Why?" Saitama considered the question with more genuine thought than he'd given anything since he'd arrived in this arena. "Habit, I guess. Nothing's ever needed more before. Kind of forgot what it felt like to actually think about it." Jiren didn't answer. He simply reset his stance, gathered himself, and attacked again. And this time, for the first time since the fight began, Saitama actually stepped into the exchange instead of simply meeting it. The impact that followed didn't look like two fighters colliding. It looked like a small sun collapsing. The shockwave tore outward in a visible ring of distorted air and light that raced across the entire arena floor, shattered stone into fine dust for half a kilometer in every direction, and rattled the observation platform hard enough that even the Grand Priest, robes billowing, was forced to widen his stance to keep his footing. "Your Highnesses," he said, voice carrying an edge of real urgency for the first time all day, "I would strongly recommend we consider halting this match. The structural integrity of the arena boundary is beginning to show genuine strain." Neither Zeno answered immediately. Both were leaning forward on their thrones, eyes wide, utterly transfixed, but present Zeno's small hands had curled tight around the armrests, and something in his expression had shifted from pure delight into something more complicated. The specific unease of a child realizing a game had gotten bigger than he understood. That was when the rift tore wider. It happened without warning. A silent, jagged fracture splitting open in the sky above the arena's outer edge, wide enough now to be visible to the naked eye, spilling a faint, wrong-colored light that didn't belong to any of the 16 universes represented in that stadium. The temperature around it dropped in a widening radius. Fighters on the nearest platform scrambled back instinctively, some transforming out of pure defensive reflex, none of them entirely sure what they were reacting to. Whiss's staff snapped up immediately, expression losing its usual pleasant calm for something considerably more focused. "That's the boundary between his universe and ours. It's destabilizing." "From what?" Beerus demanded. "From the fight," Whiss said. "Every exchange between them is releasing more force than this arena, or the barrier holding his world's rift shut, was built to absorb. If it tears fully open before we address it, we won't simply lose the tournament boundary. We could lose containment between two entire universes." Down below, mid-exchange, Saitama and Jiren both felt it at the same moment. A change in the air itself. A wrongness neither of them had caused directly, but both of them, on some animal level, recognized as a genuine problem. They broke apart, several meters between them now, both breathing harder than either had been a minute earlier, and looked up at the widening tier in the sky together. "That's new," Saitama said. "That is not tournament interference," Jiren said. "That is something else." The Grand Priest was already moving, crossing the distance to the arena floor in a single unhurried step that somehow covered hundreds of meters, robes settling around him as he landed beside the fracture with an expression that had, for the third time that day, slipped fully out of serene and into genuinely, professionally alarmed. "This is precisely what I was concerned about," he said, examining the tier with a focus that made the air around it visibly still. "The rift that brought you here was never meant to withstand this level of sustained force. Every exchange between the two of you has been placing strain directly on its edges. If it tears fully open, what happens?" Goku asked, arriving at a dead sprint, Ultra Instinct's silver still fading from his eyes as the fight's shockwaves finally settled enough to let him close the distance. Two universes with fundamentally incompatible physical laws would be forced into direct, unmediated contact, the Grand Priest said. Not a visit. Not a crossing like the one that brought him here. A permanent, uncontrolled merger of the boundary between them. And I have no reliable way to predict what that would do to either world's stability. Silence again. The third time that day the entire arena had gone quiet at once. but this one carried none of the awe from before. This was the specific, focused quiet of beings who understood, all at once, exactly what was actually at stake. Saitama looked at the widening fracture, then at Jiren, then at the Grand Priest, and something in his flat expression settled into a decision that had nothing to do with boredom at all. "Okay," he said. "So how do we close it?" "The rift responds to concentrated, controlled force applied directly to its edges," the Grand Priest said. "Not raw power, precision, enough force to seal the tear shut before it widens further, applied with enough restraint that it doesn't simply tear the opposite direction instead. I could attempt it myself, but given the rift's unique connection to your specific physiology, I suspect your own contribution would stabilize it far more effectively than mine alone. So basically," Saitama said, "you need me to punch it, carefully." "That is," the Grand Priest said, with the faintest ghost of something that might, on anyone else, have been dry amusement. "A remarkably accurate summary." Jiren, still watching the tear with the same unreadable focus he brought to everything, stepped forward without being asked. "I'll help stabilize it." Precision work benefits from more than one source of control. Goku raised a hand immediately. "Same. I'm in." The Grand Priest inclined his head, robes settling, and gestured toward the widening fracture with quiet, unhurried authority. "Then let us not delay further. The longer this remains open, the less control any of us will have over the outcome." The three of them moved into position around the tear, Jiren and Goku bracing at its widening edges, channeling careful, restrained pulses of ki, designed to hold the fracture's shape steady rather than force it closed, while Saitama stepped directly beneath it, rolling his shoulder once with the same old, meaningless habit from a body that hadn't needed to prepare for anything in longer than he could remember. He looked up at the tear, a jagged wound in the sky, spilling wrong-colored light across an arena that held, in that moment, more raw power than most universes ever produced in a lifetime. And, for the first time since a supermarket parking lot had folded into nothing beneath his feet, allowed himself something close to genuine focus. "All right," Saitama said quietly. "Let's see if I can actually be useful for once." He drew back his fist. For the first time all day, he wasn't holding anything back at all. The punch didn't look like much. That was the strange part. The part that made even the Grand Priest go still with genuine attention. No wind-up, no visible gathering of force. Just a single fist rising and falling in the space of a heartbeat, aimed not at the center of the tear but at its widening edge, with a precision that suggested Saitama had understood the assignment better than anyone expected. The impact didn't explode outward, it folded inward, a concussive pulse of contained force that raced along the fracture's jagged edge like a seam being drawn shut by an invisible hand, sealing the wrongness at its border a fraction of an inch at a time. Goku and Jiren held their positions on either side, channeling steady, controlled pulses of ki to keep the tear's shape from buckling under the sudden pressure, both of them straining with real, visible effort against a force that neither had ever been trained to manage. "It's working," Goku said through gritted teeth, sweat running down his jaw despite the fact that sweat, for him, was a genuinely rare occurrence. "Keep going?" Saitama didn't answer. He'd stopped talking somewhere in the last 10 seconds, all of his usual flat commentary burned away by something that, on him, looked almost like real concentration. Fist still raised, eyes fixed on the narrowing wound in the sky, waiting for the exact moment to strike again. He found it, struck again. The tear narrowed further, the wrong-colored light spilling from its edges dimming by degrees, the temperature around the arena floor slowly climbing back toward something that belonged to this universe, rather than the space between two of them. Above, watching from the observation platform with genuine, undisguised tension, the Grand Priest allowed himself the smallest exhale. "The rift is stabilizing," he said. Whatever instinct guided that strike, it was precisely correct. A fraction more force in either direction, and the tear would have widened instead. How does he know how to do that? Beerus demanded, tail lashing, watching from the stands with an expression that had abandoned smugness for genuine grudging respect somewhere in the last few minutes. He's not even from a universe with ki. I suspect, Whis said, staff lowered now, watching with quiet fascination, that a being who has spent an unknowable amount of time delivering exactly the amount of force required to end any given threat has developed an extraordinarily precise relationship with his own strength. Restraint, it turns out, is a skill like any other. He simply had more practice than anyone else in this arena. Below, the tier narrowed to a thin, silent line, then a hairline crack, then, with one final careful strike, delivered with a gentleness that looked almost tender compared to everything that had come before it. Nothing at all. The sky above the arena closed seamlessly, the wrong-colored light winking out, the temperature settling, the pressure behind everyone's eyes finally, fully releasing. Silence again. But this one, finally, carried something like relief. Saitama lowered his fist, rolled his shoulder once, old habit, still meaningless, and looked up at the unbroken sky with an expression that had settled, for the moment, into something almost peaceful. Nice, he said, to no one in particular. That actually felt like it mattered. Goku dropped to one knee, breathing hard, grin never once leaving his face despite the exhaustion written into every line of him. That was genuinely one of the best days I've had in a long time. Thank you for that. Jiren said nothing, but the look he gave Saitama carried something that, on a face as still as his, counted as profound respect. He inclined his head once, a gesture that meant more from him than words would have from anyone else, and stepped back to let the Grand Priest close the remaining distance. The rift is fully sealed, the Grand Priest said, examining the empty sky with quiet satisfaction. Your world and ours are, once again, entirely separate, which brings us back to the question I asked you earlier. Saitama looked at him, then at Goku, still grinning despite the exhaustion, then at Jiren, arms crossed once more, but watching him now with something that hadn't been there before the fight started. He thought about the supermarket parking lot, the coupon that had probably expired hours ago now, in whatever way time worked across a boundary like the one he'd just helped close. The particular, familiar disappointment of going home to a world that never quite gave him what he was looking for. Then he thought about a punch that had actually made him move his feet, and a stillness in Jiren's focus that had felt, for the first time in longer than he could measure, like being truly seen. Can I get a rain check? Saitama asked. On the going home part, I think I'd like to stick around a little longer. See what else this place has got. The Grand Priest considered this with the same unhurried calm he brought to everything, then inclined his head. That can be arranged. Though I should warn you, remaining here means remaining under my observation, at least until we better understand the full nature of your abilities. And I suspect, he added, glancing toward the stands, where an entire arena's worth of fighters, gods, and angels were still watching, with expressions ranging from awe to open calculation. You will find no shortage of beings eager to test exactly how far that observation needs to extend. Saitama looked around at all of it. The cratered arena floor, the 16 universes worth of combatants still processing what they'd just witnessed, Goku already bouncing back to his feet with the eager energy of a man already planning the next fight, Jiren watching him with quiet, patient anticipation, and, for the first time since a supermarket parking lot had folded into nothing beneath his feet, felt something settle into place that had been missing for a very long time. Yeah, he said, I think I can live with that. The tournament resumed within the hour, its rules quietly amended to account for a variable no one had ever planned for. An unaligned fighter, bound to no universe, observed by an angel's personal authority, permitted to remain only so long as he caused no further disqualifying interference. It was, by any reasonable measure, an absurd compromise. Nobody in that arena, least of all the two small gods who ruled over all of it, seemed to mind. Saitama didn't fight in every match that followed. He didn't need to. It was enough, for now, to simply stand at the edge of the arena and watch beings who had spent lifetimes chasing power throw everything they had at each other, waiting, patiently, for the first time in longer than he could remember, for the day one of them finally gave him a fight he couldn't walk away from bored. He'd find it, eventually. He was fairly sure of that now, in a way he hadn't been in longer than he could measure. Somewhere in a multiverse this large, holding beings capable of closing tears in reality with their bare hands, there had to be something that could finally push him past the edge of easy. Until then, he had a tournament to watch, a god's stillness to keep chasing across a cratered battlefield, and, for the first time in longer than he could remember, something that felt unmistakably like the beginning of a good day.